A police cruiser skids to a halt in front of my backyard. Karen's finger jabs through the air, accusing me of building an illegal pool. Just as the officer steps forward, a black SUV pulls up. Federal wildlife agents step out with a rolled-up map in hand. One of them looks at her and says, "Ma'am, this isn't just a pond. This is protected land." The first time Karen saw the pond, she stood frozen at the edge of her perfectly trimmed lawn, sunglasses perched like a hawk scanning for prey. It wasn't just water to her, it was an offense, an unpermitted disruption in her manicured kingdom. What she didn't see was what the pond actually meant. It began months earlier. I had recently retired from 32 years working as a forest ranger, mostly in the Pacific Northwest. My wife, Ellen, had always dreamed of having a little pond out back. She passed away 3 years ago, and building that pond became my way of keeping her here with me. I didn't just dig a hole and fill it with water. I designed it like the quiet mountain pools she used to love, complete with native cattails, a smooth stone edge, shaded areas for fish to rest. I stocked it with bluegill and a few trout fingerlings I'd raised myself under permit. It wasn't flashy. No lights, no fountain. Just a small slice of peace. But to Karen, peace wasn't regulation. I was tending the edge of the pond one morning, adjusting the slope to prevent runoff, when I heard the familiar slap of sandals and the unmistakable voice. "Excuse me. What do you think this is?" She stood on the sidewalk like it was her courtroom, clipboard in hand. Her golden retriever, Tinsel, snarled at the air beside her, mimicking the energy. I said calmly, "It's a fishing pond. I built it myself." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Pond? That's a pool without a approval. And pools need permits." I smiled politely and went back to adjusting the stones. That afternoon, she was back, this time taking photos. Of my yard, my fence, even my house number. She made no attempt to be subtle. She didn't have to. Karen had become something of an urban legend in our neighborhood, calling code enforcement over lawn chairs, handing out citations she typed herself, using phrases like, "I represent the standards." But she made a mistake. She thought this was just another backyard vanity project. 2 days later, I received a citation notice on my door. Unpermitted water structure. It came with a copy of the HOA's water use policy. Typed, highlighted, and clipped to an anonymous complaint. Karen's tone changed once she knew she'd gotten the system involved. She strutted by during her evening walks, grinning. "Might want to drain that thing before they make you fill it with concrete," she said. I didn't respond. Instead, I went to my old file cabinet and pulled out a folder I hadn't touched in 3 years. Inside, emails, forms, topographic surveys, and a letter, unsigned, but on federal letterhead, confirming my land had been accepted into a pilot wetland restoration initiative. Back when Ellen and I bought the property, I submitted a proposal. I didn't think it would go anywhere. But now that approval was gold. I sent a short email to a contact listed at the Department of Natural Resources. Just a few lines and the GPS coordinates. That was it. The silence over the next few days was loud. Karen ramped up her campaign. She printed out photos and brought them to the HOA meeting. She said the pond was unsafe, stagnant, a breeding ground for mosquitoes. She claimed it threatened property values. Then came the day the cruiser rolled up. I was sipping coffee by the pond when I heard the tires crunch the gravel out front. Karen followed the officers down the path like a tour guide. "There," she shouted. "Right there." "It's a code violation." The officers walked past her. One looked at the water, took a photo, scribbled something on a pad. Karen looked triumphant. But before she could say another word, another vehicle pulled up, a black SUV with no markings. Just 2 figures in khaki uniforms stepping out with rolled maps and badges. Karen's smile faltered. One of them stepped forward and asked, "Who's the homeowner here?" I raised my hand. "That's me." The man nodded and unfolded a topographic map, pointed at the pond, and looked directly at Karen. "Ma'am," he said, "this isn't just a pond. This area is now part of a federal conservation zone." She blinked. "Excuse me?" He tapped the map again. "This land is protected. You just called the cops on a government restoration site." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. I sipped my coffee and smiled. Karen didn't speak to me for 2 days after the officials left. But her silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. The kind of quiet that meant she was planning something bigger. I knew that look on her face. It was the look of someone who felt humiliated but hadn't accepted it yet. The kind of person who thinks authority only matters when it agrees with her. She wasn't finished. It started with a letter slipped into my mailbox. Not from the HOA, this one came directly from the local zoning board. Apparently, the HOA had requested a formal review of my unauthorized construction. A copy of the complaint was included. It was 4 pages long. 4 pages about a pond. She didn't just mention the water. She brought up my fence, the increased foot traffic from local kids walking past the yard, and even claimed my fish pond posed a threat to neighborhood health and tranquility. It was obsessive, and it was personal. By the time I walked to the community board with my documents in hand, the rumors had already begun. Some neighbors were curious. A few were whispering that I was in legal trouble. I noticed a few familiar faces avoiding eye contact. That's what Karen was best at, not just filing complaints, but turning public opinion before facts had a chance to speak. At the hearing, the HOA president cleared his throat and asked if I had anything to say. I handed him the same file I had shown the federal agents: maps, permits, ecological reports. I kept my answers calm, professional. But I could feel Karen stare the entire time. She sat in the front row, legs crossed, fingers tapping on her clipboard. She wanted a fight. I wasn't going to give her one. That night, I got a message from a neighbor named Lucas. He lived 2 doors down, a quiet guy with a young son who liked to fish. He asked if the pond would be okay, if it was still safe to visit. I told him yes, and the next day, his son came by with a fishing pole and a bag of worms. It reminded me why I built it in the first place. Karen saw him, of course. She took photos from her porch, loud enough that the boy could hear her camera clicking. He left early, head down. I knew I had to take a deeper step. I went online and pulled up my old contact from the Department of Natural Resources. I sent another message. This time I wasn't just reporting Karen's harassment. I was asking for support, clarity, visibility, maybe even presence. If she wanted to turn this into a spectacle, she'd get one. In the meantime, Karen doubled down. She printed flyers. Actual printed flyers. Taped them to the community mailbox, the tennis court fence, even the grocery store bulletin board. The heading said, "Dangerous illegal backyard water site. HOA takes action." She named me directly. Called me uncooperative. Claimed I refused to drain my backyard cesspool. And some neighbors bought it. I started seeing fewer ways when I walked my dog. Conversations stopped when I approached. A few people removed me from the community group chat. Karen had poisoned a well, and she was proud of it. But something changed on Friday. A sleek silver car pulled up to my driveway. A woman stepped out, mid-40s, blazer, DNR badge on her hip. Behind her, a second SUV rolled in. 2 uniformed agents exited. No announcements. No spectacle. Just quiet professionalism. She shook my hand, introduced herself as Maya, then asked if she could walk the perimeter of the pond. I showed her everything: the fish, the filtration setup, the water testing kit I used weekly. She nodded, impressed, said very little. Then she asked one question. Would you be okay with us formally recognizing this site? I didn't hesitate. That weekend, the HOA announced a special emergency review scheduled for Tuesday. Karen called it a community protection measure, but she had no idea who would be attending. And she had no idea what was coming. The morning of the emergency review meeting, the neighborhood felt different. A kind of quiet anticipation hung in the air. Lawns were freshly trimmed. Driveways swept. Karen had posted a final message in the community group the night before, telling everyone to show up and protect our standards. She ended it with a little American flag emoji. She was rallying them like it was a battle. She had no idea she was walking into her own defeat. By 9 a.m., the HOA clubhouse was full. People who hadn't attended a single meeting in years suddenly sat with folded arms and curious stares. Some were there to support her. Some were just there for the show. I walked in quietly and sat in the back. Karen was already in the front row, a manila folder bulging with paperwork on her lap. She looked ready to prosecute. The HOA chair, Mr. Donovan, opened a meeting by reading the agenda. He said the issue was ongoing concerns regarding an unauthorized aquatic structure and its impact on community compliance. Karen nodded as he spoke, like she had written it herself. Then came the first twist. Mr. Donovan cleared his throat and said, "Before we proceed, we have some guests joining us from the Department of Natural Resources and U.S. Fish and Wildlife." Karen's head snapped toward the door as two wildlife officers stepped into the room. Behind them was Maya, the same official who had walked my pond 2 days earlier. She looked calm, professional, but she wasn't smiling. Karen's voice cut through the silence. "Wait, who invited them?" Maya responded without turning her head. "We were asked to attend as a courtesy to clarify some confusion about the property in question." Karen stood up. "They have no authority here. This is a homeowner's matter." Maya calmly opened a folder and pulled out a stamped federal document. "Actually, it's both. As of last month, this area was approved as a satellite habitat under the Wetlands Recovery and Conservation Pilot Program." There was a pause in the room. A real one. No one breathed. Karen blinked. "You mean the pond?" Maya nodded. "The pond. And the surrounding 37 feet of native buffer. All of it is now registered with the Federal Restoration Network. That means any interference, alteration, or harassment concerning its ecological use can fall under federal jurisdiction." Karen's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. She turned to the HOA board. "This can't be legal. That area wasn't zoned for that." The officer beside Maya stepped forward. He held up a laminated aerial photo. It showed the pond clearly marked, a red line around its border, and a stamp at the bottom reading "Protected Habitat, Verified." "We're not here to debate zoning," he said. "We're here to inform the board that this property has been reviewed, accepted, and certified under Title 16 of the U.S. Code, which means any formal HOA action attempting to force removal could trigger legal consequences." Karen's hands trembled slightly. She looked around the room, expecting someone to back her up. But the mood had shifted. Some neighbors leaned away from her. Some whispered. One even laughed under his breath. Then Lucas stood up from the back. The quiet neighbor. The one with the son who used to fish in my yard. He spoke just one sentence. "Maybe next time we wait to understand something before we try to tear it down." Karen looked like she'd been slapped. She sat down slowly, her folder slipping from her lap to the floor. The rest of the meeting was short. The HOA board said they would review the matter in light of federal findings. But it was over. Everyone knew it. I stepped outside into the sun and walked back toward my house. The wind rippled across the pond like it was proud of itself. A blue heron stood at the far edge, still as a statue, watching the water. I hadn't seen that bird in months. That evening, someone left flowers on the bench near the pond. No note, just daisies, Ellen's favorite. For once, the neighborhood was quiet. But I knew Karen wasn't finished. She never admitted defeat. She just searched for the next crack. The next morning, there was a knock at my door. Not aggressive. Not loud. Just 3 measure taps. When I opened it, Karen was standing there. No clipboard. No folder. Just her, in a wrinkled cardigan and oversized sunglasses, the kind someone wears to hide from the world. She didn't speak at first. She looked past me toward the pond, then down at her shoes, then back up. "Do you have a minute?" I didn't answer. I just stepped aside. We walked the path around the pond together in silence. The morning light danced on the water. A pair of ducks floated near the cattails, unbothered by our footsteps. She stopped near the bench and looked out at the heron, still perched like a guardian. "I used to hate the quiet," she said finally. "After my husband passed, the silence got so loud, I'd walk the neighborhood just to hear cars, dogs, anything. I listened. I didn't interrupt. I know what people say. I know what I've become. But this wasn't about the pond." She swallowed hard. It was about control. About having a reason to wake up, to argue, to matter. She turned to me. Her voice cracked. I didn't know it was part of something bigger. I just saw something that wasn't mine and thought it must be wrong. I could feel the tightness in her words. Not just shame, grief, regret. "My Ellen would have liked this," I said. "She believed people could heal around water. That it reminds us we're small, but connected, Karen sat on the bench slowly. She didn't cry, but her hands trembled on her lap. I wasn't trying to destroy it, she whispered. I just didn't understand. I nodded. You still can. It's not too late. That afternoon, the story spread across the neighborhood, not as gossip, but as curiosity. People walked by, not to glare, but to ask questions. Two teenagers from the next street over helped me clean the path. A retired couple offered native plants for the shoreline. Karen didn't come outside. Not for 2 days. Then, during one of my routine water tests, I heard a soft voice behind me. Do you need help? It was her. No clipboard. No dog. Just gloves in her hand and a little gardening bag. I didn't answer. I just handed her the rake. For the next hour, we worked side by side. She didn't complain, didn't direct, just raked, pulled weeds, and refilled birdseed at the post Ellen installed years ago. Around 6 p.m., Lucas showed up with his son. The boy carried a small fishing rod and a tackle box with a cracked lid. He looked at Karen with hesitation. She walked over and knelt beside him. I owe you an apology, she said. This pond belongs to all of us. The boy didn't say anything, but he smiled. That night, the pond looked different. Not because of anything physical, but because for the first time in months, it wasn't a battlefield. It was a bridge. The next morning, Maya returned. She brought a bronze plaque with a federal insignia engraved into it and a title, Certified Wildlife Conservation Habitat. She asked if I wanted to mount it on a stake near the pond. I shook my head. No. Put it on the bench. Let people sit and read it. As we installed it, Karen stood nearby, hands folded. Maya didn't glare at her. Didn't judge. She simply said, if you want to volunteer for the local wetlands group, we could use someone like you. Karen looked surprised. Me? You're persistent, organized, and clearly care whether it comes out gracefully or not. Karen actually laughed. I guess I have a lot of time now, she said. For the first time, I saw her without the armor. Not the HOA badge. Not the barking orders. Just a woman trying to find a reason to care again. And she had found one, in the same place she once tried to destroy. But there was still one final twist she didn't expect. Something deeper, something even I hadn't realized until the agents came back with a new request. It was a Monday morning when the letter arrived. Not an email. Not a phone call. A real, printed envelope with a Department of the Interior seal and my name handwritten in blue ink. Inside was a single-page letter. They wanted to feature the pond. Not just as a conservation site, but as a model. The agency was launching a national initiative to showcase successful microhabitats developed on private property. My pond, they said, had met the highest criteria: native restoration, species return, sustainable design, and most importantly, community impact. They asked if I would allow a small film crew to visit, document it, share its story. I just stood there, staring at the page. I hadn't built the pond for recognition. I built it for peace, for a purpose, for Ellen. And now, somehow, it had grown into something bigger than I imagined. I walked out to the bench. The plaque shimmered softly under the morning light. Ducks moved in slow figure eights across the water. A blue dragonfly skimmed the surface. Karen showed up 20 minutes later. She was carrying 2 mugs of coffee. No clipboard. Just 2 hands and a nervous smile. I saw the van, she said. Are they here for the pond? I handed her the letter. She read it silently, her brow furrowed. Then her eyes filled. You did it, she whispered. I shook my head. We did it. Later that day, the film crew arrived. 3 people, polite, efficient, respectful. They filmed the perimeter, interviewed Maya, and captured the heron taking flight right as the sun broke through the clouds. It was surreal. Lucas and his son were there too. The boy held up the fish he'd caught, just big enough to smile about, small enough to throw back. The crew asked if there was anyone else who had been involved. I hesitated. Then I turned toward Karen. She was standing at the far end of the pond, adjusting the netting around the new native plants she brought last week. She hadn't seen the cameras yet. I called her over. She looked surprised. Me? They want the whole story, I said. She gave a nervous chuckle. I was kind of the villain in the beginning. I nodded. And now you're the guardian. She stepped into the frame. When they asked what changed her mind, she paused for a long time. Then she said, I stopped looking at it like someone else's project. And I started seeing what it gave back to all of us. It was quiet when she finished. Even the birds seemed to pause. The documentary aired 3 weeks later. Short, under 10 minutes. But it went viral. People from other neighborhoods reached out, asking how to start their own conservation efforts. One local high school science teacher brought her class to visit the pond. The HOA, for once, issued a public statement. They congratulated the community for transforming a private effort into a public asset. It was the closest they would ever come to admitting they had been wrong. Karen, believe it or not, joined the local ecology group. Not just as a volunteer, but eventually as the liaison between homeowners and the DNR. Her stubbornness, once a weapon, had finally found a worthy cause. One night, after the last of the visiting kids had gone home, I sat on the bench as the sun dipped low. Fireflies flickered over the reeds. The pond shimmered like glass. I could almost hear Ellen's voice again, telling me it mattered. That even something as small as a backyard pond could hold life, meaning, and hope. I didn't build it to win anything. I built it to remember. And now, others would remember it too. The same place that once made a neighbor call the cops was now a sanctuary that brought a neighborhood together. All because one small corner of water, filled with life, stood its ground and healed everything around it.